It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We're live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State. Also live on YouTube and on Facebook. We're having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. I want to welcome to the microphone here a member of Erie County Council in the 2nd District. It's Jim Wertz. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, great to be back. Always wonderful to be here with you for a great conversation.
Absolutely here. All right, let's set the stage here, Jim, as far as the main topic of, and we've got plenty of time, you know it's radio. The main topic of our conversation is in January, you were unanimously voted as the chairman of the Erie County Election Board. So let's paint that picture. Okay, was this something that you desired to become?
For sure.
Chair?
Well,
okay.
You know, we had talked about a number of posts, but of course, with my long history with the Democratic Party and my long history in of protecting and defending elections and processes and outcomes, it was a natural fit, right? I kind of know the process of the election office and the machinations that go on there, and so my colleagues believed that I was the right man for the job, and I still would contend that I certainly am.
And that had to be satisfying that you got a 7-0, right?
Oh, for sure. Now, listen, I think everybody is looking for a new era on council. It was a tumultuous couple of years in the previous 4 years with the last administration, and folks were looking for some harmony out of council and out of county government generally. And I think that out of the gate, we kind of were achieving some of that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the first big vote that we took outside of like personnel things was the ICE vote to remove ICE from the Erie County Prison. That was not a unanimous vote and pretty much divided along partisan lines. But it wasn't a contentious issue. We just disagreed. And I think that's healthy. I think when we disagree over some of these issues, it fosters a more vibrant debate and hopefully helps us get to a little more of a middle ground on some of it. And so that vote went through in the end of January. And was kind of like my entry there as well. I kind of brought that in. I was the sponsor of that ordinance and felt strongly about it. Kind of the humanitarian angle of that, and also trying to put county government in what I believed was the right position in that debate. And I think that we did. And so I'm proud of that vote. I'm proud that we got that ordinance across, and I'm proud of the county executive for making sure that negotiation with the U.S. Marshals went well. And the U.S. Marshals were happy to have that conversation and to engage in the contract change.
Let's talk about the election board. You know, there's a couple of fundamentals here because, again, I've been covering these elections, 7+ years, and always got the sense that the personnel that we have at election office, they're just so good. You know, Tanya, I mean, they just run a tight ship. It's highly professional. We've invested tons of money into that, a lot of it given by the federal and the state government here. So the word is the gold standard. Yep. Are we still in that situation?
I think so. I mean, I don't want to take full responsibility for it, but I had been championing our election office as the gold standard across Pennsylvania for years. I told folks in Philadelphia and Harrisburg I would say that every chance I get, and I still do. I think people need to have full faith in what happens in that office, and I think that it is an office that is that office in particular is one that is that's full of integrity and really understands well what the minutia of every election is. And so, during my time as party chairman, we spent a lot of hours with a couple of different clerks calling in and asking questions and raising the concerns that were being brought to us by members of the public throughout an election day or an election cycle. And we were always met with open arms and a healthy response, and continued to give us confidence in the processes that the election office is engaged in.
You got the sense too that that even on election night, I'm sure there were different moments and things, but they had plenty of poll watchers. They had plenty of folks looking at everything there from both sides, and so we just had this kind of steady situation here. But somehow that has changed insofar as this Election Truth Alliance was questioning our results. And so, let's talk about who they are.
Yeah, well, I don't really know who they are. Outside of that, so part of how this conversation gets rolling is that I had a meeting with these folks back in 2025. A gentleman that I knew here in Erie County had been working with them, and I worked with him on a number of issues, some political, some non-political, just some general community stuff, things as banal as glass recycling. and so it's somebody that I had a lot of confidence in and respect for, and still do. And he was working with these folks with the Election Truth Alliance who were doing some statistical analysis of the 2024 election. And he said, he called me up one day and said, "Hey, I've been helping these guys work on this analysis." He's a data guy. I'm not a big data guy. And he said, "Would you come and meet with these guys on a Zoom meeting to hear their presentation?" I said, "Look, I'm not down with election deniers. I don't do that. I'm not going to entertain it." And he goes, No, they're not denying the outcome of the 2024 election. There were just these kind of statistical anomalies that they have seen. And so I jumped on the Zoom meeting. He texted me a link. I jump on the Zoom meeting. I listened to it. I'm not fully tied into all of what they're talking about with the statistical analysis, but they said that they wanted to talk to a local attorney because that's how these things work in Pennsylvania. You have to have local representation. The only election attorney I know was my solicitor in the Democratic Party, Tim McNair, and Tim's a great guy, and so I figured he'd be open to the conversation and gave them his contact information. Well, months later, I think later in 2025 or right at the beginning of 2026, they filed a lawsuit in a couple of counties across Pennsylvania.
Allegheny, Cambria, and Erie.
There you go. Yeah. So, and their lawsuit does not allege any wrongdoing by the Board of Election or the election office. I think part of the problem that we're running into here is that some of the parties involved in the conversation we're having didn't actually read the lawsuit. And so they don't allege any wrongdoing by the county or by the election office or the Board of Elections. But they make a claim that they feel there might be there might have been a problem with a tabulator, or like kind of with the firmware in the tabulators. So they postulate their argument and make that claim. And I think from my vantage point, it's appropriate to say, hey, why don't we test these tabulators and just ensure that they are. Now, both the clerk and the director of elections told me when I raised the issue, that we're very confident in the logic and accuracy testing. And that was good enough for me because, as you point out, I've worked closely with Tanya over the years, with Tanya Fernandez, the election director, and I have no reason to doubt her affinity. So
we do this testing, Jim. I mean,
we
this
do
logic
now,
and accuracy.
We do the logic and accuracy testing, and one of the claims that they make in this lawsuit is that you see these statistical anomalies after a volume of votes. So in the logic and accuracy testing, there may not be enough votes present to see that. And I said, what's the big deal? I feel like we have an opportunity and an obligation to ensure that when we tell people that this is the gold standard, that we have checked every box ducks and done everything. Well, that raising that question upset some folks, and the fact that I had met with these folks a year prior upset some folks, and so
what was the timing of you raising that question? Was that
right
just
after
in the spring here?
No, right in January, right after
Okay.
I got sworn in. An email came from our solicitor giving us an update on the lawsuit and the trading of briefs between Mr. McNair and our solicitor Tom Tallarico, and he clearly stated in his email to us that these guys are not denying the outcome of the election. They're not alleging any wrongdoing. Their claim is about the larger statistical anomalies that they see and their theory of the case. And so he was just briefing us on that. And I responded to that email to all of council and to our clerk and the elections director and said, I'm familiar with these guys and I'm familiar with what they're seeking. I don't know if a judge would allow that or not. And probably won't, and that's fine too. But I think so I raised it in that email back to the group as a whole, and that's when our clerk reached out and said, "Hey, we'd like to have a meeting to talk about this and figure it out." And so I did. I went into that meeting and left that meeting feeling fine and never to bring it up again until sometime down the road when things seem to go a little haywire. And so, I would argue that the people who are raising these raising concerns about my chairmanship or the meeting that I took with the Election Truth Alliance folks in the spring of 25, should probably check themselves somewhere along the line. I mean, this is what public figures do and what elected officials do. I recognize that some of my colleagues probably don't meet with as many folks as they should, but I think this is no different than what anybody else would do on any issue or any topic. I was a high profile kind of involved election defender type person. So it was natural that this gentleman that I knew would invite me into a conversation like that. It's really no different than a conversation that a legislator would have with Google or somebody about AI or about data centers, trying to gather more information. But so some of my colleagues conflated what they called a conflict of interest.
Hold on a second. I want to go to the break because I want to talk about what the concerns were and how it was presented here in the more recent days. We've got Jim Wertz with us here. He is on Erie County Council, member of the election board. Let's take the break here, 19 after 4 here on Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show, the crucial conversations that Erie needs. Jim Wertz is with us here. He is on Erie County Council, also a member of the election board, and formerly the chairman. And so, as chair, at what point were concerns presented to you about this interaction with the Election Truth Alliance?
Well, early on, right after not long after having the conversation that I was describing in the last block. And I think, our solicitor and I had agreed that neither one of us believed that anything involving that lawsuit would ever come up for a vote. But if it would, that I would abstain from that vote as just to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. And
you were okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine because, I don't want to engage in that either. But when people, when people wanted to try to make this a bigger deal than it was, to like throw some scarlet paint at me across the dais, then
you're bringing up your literary background, the scarlet.
Well, but so I think there were greater motivations here, and quite frankly, I think there was a lack of leadership in kind of controlling the situation on council. I mean, it should have just been handled, and the way that the two Republicans and two Democratic folks on council behaved was more like it was my obligation to step down or something, and I'm just simply not going to do that. It was not appropriate. The means by which they were trying to remove me from that seat and did remove me from that seat was not appropriate. I've had a multitude of attorneys from both sides of the aisle reach out and offer to represent me, to put me back in that chair, and I just don't think that it's not a worthy endeavor to have that increased conflict.
Right.
We got enough problems on council, and I think I think that my interest, as it was when I came in January, is to try to resolve them or work through those, and I don't know really where we go from here.
Don't you think that, though, the idea that they actually sued Erie County and sued the Erie County Election Board was kind of, stepping over a line? Because listen to what they want. They're asking the federal court to declare that proper election procedures were not followed, that, mandate procedural safeguards to ensure future compliance, and award attorney and expert witness fees as allowed by law. I mean, the actual legal action is pretty intense here.
Yeah, and I think that's part of a lawsuit strategy. I mean, I don't know about that, but you go for extremes and hoping to land on what you want. It's like with the debate over raising the minimum wage, right? We've been fighting for $15 an hour so long that it's kind of moot, right? So let's talk about $20 an hour, and maybe you land on 15 at some point. I don't think we should get
that sounds like the art of the deal, Jim.
Hey, maybe it is. I may have had a copy of that at one time a couple of decades ago, but I think that's what people do in these situations, right? You'll recall that there was a certain state senator that tried to sue me for $2 million at one point, right? So I think people go to extremes in these cases, trying to make their point, and then hopefully land at a more moderate resolution or the outcome that they desire. I had no part in the framing of that lawsuit, or didn't even, other than just knowledge that the lawsuit existed, didn't really know many of the details until this conversation got rolling.
You said that maybe the way that this was approached, was you feel like it was not fair to you?
Well, I think it was partisan in nature, generally, and I think we were all hoping to get into a place where this was going to be a council and a term where we were moving beyond all that, and so before you try to correct me and say that there were two Democrats and two Republicans on there, I question, let's not forget that one of those Democrats was censured by the Democratic Party for engaging in Republican leadership votes, and look, I've talked talked to him many times and told him, like, I've got no problem with how somebody votes on an ordinance or a resolution. But when the other irony here is that when you're talking about pushing people into leadership, like that person, then that seems a little hypocritical to be taking such an intense stand against me. And by the way, I'm still on the board of elections. I'm
Right.
still a member of county council. This was generally a performative act by some folks, I think, that were hoping to grab a headline out of it.
I have to stay with Election Truth Alliance because I don't know. Have you read their news release here?
No.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's pretty alarming what they're claiming here, that there was a ballot crisis on election day, that every precinct reported ballots that could not be scanned due to paper ballot errors, thousands of ballots stored in emergency bins without chain of custody documentation. My gosh, this sounds like what we heard about the 2020 election in Rudy Giuliani.
Sure. Well, like I said, I was not involved with those folks. I had one meeting to hear about their
I mean,
presentation.
Again,
I got you, but I don't think. Look, I think at the end of the day, we all acknowledge that there was the potential for the appearance of a conflict of interest, and I thought that the solicitor and I had come up with a way to deal with that at his suggestion.
That you would step out,
just abstain from any vote on that, and that's no problem. I don't have a stake in the outcome of the lawsuit, so it doesn't matter to me. I think that the continued pursuit of this really was just a failure of being able to kind of control the partisan interests on county council in this moment, and I think that they showed themselves. I think this is a line of folks that you're going to see line up in the same ways time and time again, 4-3 with Chairman Scatella kind of taking one side or the other. And in this case, I think he chose poorly, and I think that it's a just one more illustration of kind of like some backseat driving that occurs within the council environment.
Let's get to the break here, and we'll have more with Erie County Council member Jim Wertz as we're talking about the election board, and I'm interested too about if this, the having the boards also members of council, is that
Let's
right
talk
in the
about
home rule? Or?
It is, and
Okay.
I'm happy to chat about that.
Yeah.
I've long raised objections to that, but here I am as a member of council, and those are the rules. So this is what we do.
All right, learning more about how our government works. You're having a civic lesson here on Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show, live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State, also live on YouTube and Facebook. Jim Wertz, he's a member of Erie County Council, also a member of the election board, former chair of it. Now, Chris Drexel is the chair. So how does that all work?
Chris was the vice chair, and so he stepped right into that role. And he was the previous chairman of the Board of Elections last year as well. Okay. So
is it usually rotate yearly? Or
it is elected yearly. Yeah, okay. Because the composition of the board changes from year to year. So as we were talking about before the break, it is composed of members of county council, but it is members of county council who are not on the ballot for public office. So this year, all 7 members are on the ballot. Now, Rock Copeland and I are running for Democratic State Committee, but that's not a public office. So those partisan offices don't count. You run for local Democratic Committee or whatever, you're still permitted to be on the election board. But next year, when we'll have 4 members up for re-election, the election board will be composed of just 3 of us, myself, Charlie Bale, and Jim Wynorski, because we're the only 3 that won't be on the ballot.
It's an interesting setup, but it usually is it pro forma, or are you guys kind of doing real stuff?
Well, I think we're there to be the backstop and to make hard decisions.
Kind of the governance.
Yeah, the governance of it. I mean, the day-to-day administration is the election office, right? Those folks carry out we don't know how many voter registration forms are coming in, or how many mail ballots have been cast until the election office tells us. And I think that's a good way to be. I think that the reporting back to council is fluid and pretty transparent. And so, that's what we do. We are oversight, if you want to think of it like that. And should questions arise, or should there be concerns from the public, it is the responsibility of the members of the Board of Election to bring those forward, as I did. Now, we would hope that that there is no kind of consequences for raising those questions, but obviously not every member of the board agrees there.
So the dilemma that we have in front of us here is that you were in conversation and maybe even gave some I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is how I'm seeing it. You gave some advice to this group, including a recommendation for an attorney.
Yeah, I mean, it was a I shared a contact. It wasn't a recommendation, other than that this is the only guy that I've ever worked with in this capacity. There's not a lot of election attorneys around. I mean any attorney can do it.
McNair's kind of a bulldog.
He is a bulldog, and that's what made him a good election attorney. I mean, every time during my 6 years as chairman of the party, every time that I had a concern or that a concern was raised in the field that I brought back to Tim, he was more than happy to carry it forward. And sometimes those concerns were resolved with a call to the clerk of elections at that time, Doug Smith, or sometimes he had to file something in order to make that to resolve whatever it was. We've had problems over the years with folks working at polling places wearing partisan clothing and things like that. Simple stuff, right? Things that are very easily dealt with. But I mean, we got to the point where sometimes the clerk would have to actually physically go to a polling place to tell somebody that they weren't able to wear their red hat in the polling place, or they weren't able to wear a button. Because when you're there working on election day, you are in a nonpartisan position, a nonpartisan role, and it's important that everybody respects that independence.
So I want to kind of get you on the record that you were you an advocate for the Election Truth Alliance?
No, I was not. That was, I didn't have a position. I had one Zoom call with these folks. And what I was an advocate for was ensuring that the equipment that we use to administer our elections was running as expected. And so that's the question that I raised, and was given plenty of information and confidence that everything was as it should be. And I hope that despite whatever this has stirred up, that the public continues to have their confidence in our processes, because as I've long said, as you said at the beginning of this interview, our election office is and continues to be the gold standard. But I think when these things come up, this question that was raised about the tabulators was different than you brought up 2020 a while ago. That in 2020 and in years since, there would be election deniers in the courthouse claiming that there were an old black woman who put 3,000 mail ballots into the drop box. Well, if you've ever tried to submit a mail ballot into the drop box, you know that only one at a time goes in there, right? So there's no functional way that anybody could do that, could stuff the ballot box with ballots. But this was a different question, I thought. This was a technological question, and one that we should be interested in evaluating and securing. So separate from the lawsuit, separate from any of the data that they presented, I just think that it's important that we continue to ask these questions. And listen, I'm not going to be deterred from asking hard questions. I'm a fighter by nature. I was elected by I think over 80% of my district. I won a primary with 78% of the vote. So these folks know me. They know what they're getting from me, and they trust that I'm going to continue to ask the hard questions, whether it upsets people or not.
I want to ask you about your county council solicitor, Tallarico. He also is a solicitor for the election board?
Yeah, for all of council.
He weighed in on this April 30th meeting, right?
Well, he was at the meeting, yeah, and I think his position has always been that he represents council as a whole, and when there is a block of council that forms a majority, it is his job to give them advice on what the majority would like to do. So, despite the fact that he and I had already agreed that if there was indeed a conflict of interest that would arise, something that we had to vote on, that I would abstain, there were 4 members of council that wanted a different path. And so while the ultimate process that took place was improper and unusual and unprecedented, that was the option that was before them. That was the only red meat these folks would bite on. And so fine. You had a lot of citizens to be heard during that April 30th meeting, a lot of folks coming to your defense. That had to be kind of satisfying for you. Oh, for sure. Listen, this community, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, this community knows my history and my record of defending and protecting our elections. I mean, the death threats that I faced in 2020, the online abuse that tends to be all too common out there, right? People know. I was at the barber on Saturday. You might not be able to tell, but I was at the barber on Saturday, and he said to me, I saw all the happenings online, and he was like, I was really surprised. A couple of really big Republicans in my group were commenting on these things, and they were coming to your defense, saying, how BS this was and how improper it was. So I think people in our community recognize it for what it is. They recognize it as politics at its worst, and as I've said, kind of a failure of leadership within council organization, that we would have to get to this point instead of just having the dialogue, and so it is what it is. Here we are, and we move forward, and I'll continue to work as best as I can from whatever vantage point to ensure that all of our elections remain safe and secure, and that everybody who wants to vote has an opportunity to do so. Every citizen, every registered voter that wants to engage in this process has a right to do so.
So we've been grinding on this now for about 40 minutes. But as we were talking about off air, there are really big fish to fry in Erie County
For sure.
For our economy, for our housing, for the state of our families. Do you feel that county council can get on the right track or is on the right track for moving some of the really crucial, life-changing? I mean, again, elections are important, but we've got big fish to fry.
Yeah, people are hurting every day. And listen, I represent the poorest district in Erie County. I represent the poorest and most diverse district in Erie County. And so the fact that people are struggling every single day to make ends meet. And listen, my family is, we've got 2 full-time jobs that are good paying jobs, and we've got 3 great kids and do all of our stuff, but we see it too. My basket of goods, my budget hasn't changed. My salary has not tripled to keep up with inflation. And so when I go to the grocery store, I'm back to managing that budget. I'm not buying things willy-nilly. But there are people in my district, there are folks that live up and down my block and around the corner who are not even able to do that, who don't make decisions about a budget. It's like, what can I do today to get to tomorrow? And we have to make decisions that are supportive of folks in our community that really needs it. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to be on county council. Part of most of what county government does is human and social services.
Yeah, it's not public safety, it's human services.
It's not public safety, it's human services. And we have a responsibility to help take care of folks. And oftentimes when you're receiving county services, it's because you are already beyond most other options for receiving help, right? It doesn't matter if we're talking about Pleasant Ridge Manor. It doesn't matter if we're talking about drug and alcohol treatment. You're engaged. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the prison system. You're engaging with the county because you are kind of near your last resort. And it is our responsibility to make sure that those human and social services run efficiently and effectively. And if we do our job well, our municipalities will be able to invest in economic things and be able to develop and recruit manufacturing and do the things that we always say, are the purview of some form of county government, this economic development question. And I think it's important, and we need to stay involved in that conversation. But at the end of the day, we have a nearly $600 million budget that nearly $500 million of which is dedicated to helping people. Mm-hmm. And as you pointed out in the break, like, now is a critical time to do that. And
just so that my listeners know, what we're talking about is the Cleveland Fed coming to town, and some of the historical data showing how Erie is underperforming the rest of just our region here versus Toledo versus an Appalachia. Erie GDP per worker is under the rest. Cincinnati being the highest. It was a remarkable data point, and there's a lot there. I want to go on a rabbit trail with you.
Sure.
And that is, come 2028, you have a finished Bayfront Parkway. You have a connection with the walkway from the East Side Bluff down to Holland. You might even have a market house. Again, you have the whole Bayfront in the 2nd District, right?
Yep.
What's the dilemma of gentrification versus, boy, we need investment in this district?
Well, look, I think
in the 2nd.
Yeah, I think in the 2nd District in particular, because so much of the commercial development that's happening in Erie County is happening in the 2nd District. But we have to figure out how to cohabitate together, because there are folks who are born and raised in the 2nd District, lifelong West Siders, lifelong Lower East Siders, and these folks aren't intending to go anywhere, nor should they plan to go anywhere. How do they participate in that economy, right? If you're talking about service jobs and working for tips, that's probably not a great pitch, right? I mean, part of the reason that we have a low per person GDP in Erie County is because we don't produce as much stuff as we used to do, right? We've seen a big trend toward eds and meds, and we've seen a lot of investment in tourism and other things that facilitates and necessitates a huge service economy. And so that's why we have these stats that we do that reflect kind of the way of life here in Erie County. Now, I will say, I think all of the investment that's going into downtown is good, but we need to manage that. And I think, you said City Councilman Andre Horton was here last week. He has been a longtime advocate for community benefit agreements.
Right.
I think those community benefit agreements are an integral part of moving forward. It just shows a partnership between the people who are going to benefit financially from the investments that are being made and the people who are being affected by those investments. They've
never been agreed upon.
No, that's right, and they have not been agreed upon. But I think it's a very important part of this conversation.
You think about all that building on the bayfront. No CBA.
Well, listen, we have folks on both city and county council that think if it's not affecting them and their neighbors to the left and the right, that it's not important, and that's not a good perspective to have when you sit on a governmental body. Yes, we are all representatives of our district, and we all sit there and lobby and advocate for things that will help our district. But when you have something like a community benefit agreement that doesn't touch a rural part of Erie County, that doesn't mean that you should vote against that community benefit agreement, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, we all, rising tides and whatnot, this is all important to everybody in Erie County. And how we treat people in the second district is going to ultimately dictate how people are treated in other parts of the county when that investment reaches them. You see a lot of growth happening in Mill Creek Township. You see a lot of growth happening in Summit Township. People out there want to be treated well also. Think about the big fight that's going on over the construction of a single school in Summit Township in Fort LaBeouf School District, right? People care about how they are treated by the decisions that are being made. And so I think that while many of my colleagues on both councils would like to say, well, this isn't in my district, or on city council where they're at large, this isn't in my neighborhood or wherever it is, that we lose sight of what the ultimate goal is, which is to make sure that we are making decisions that foster a community that is a great place to work and live, and that we can all be proud of. And I think that we'll get there. I think the conversations are good. But to your point about the fact that we don't have a community benefit agreement yet, and that we don't have certain things instilled in the process that would make it better for the folks in this community, we still have an obligation to continue to try to push those important issues.
Last question for Council Member Jim Wertz. You're going to continue to be a full-throated collegial member of County Council?
I think I came into this. I came into County Council in January, fully anticipating that there would be some folks that go, "Oh, this guy used to be chairman of the Democratic Party," and I am a partisan when it comes to politics. I am not a partisan when it comes to policy, and that's how I approached. That's how I approached my first few months. I'm about 5 months in now, and so that's how I approached the first few months, and that's how I'll continue to operate. Listen, my values just are democratic values. It's where we are. It's where the party. I don't agree with everything in the party platform, but I certainly don't see myself reflected anywhere else, right? And I'm in a district that I think feels very much the same way, and so those values drive some of my decision making. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to create policy and pass ordinances and resolutions that are going to positively impact everybody in Erie County. And so hopefully we can do that in a way that gets everybody into the raft, and we move forward together. Well, I said we push that ICE ordinance through 4-3. I think we'll have a lot of 4-3 things, but that doesn't mean that those disagreements we have over how something gets funded or over what the ultimate objective is for a program or a plan or an opportunity, it doesn't change that. It doesn't make it just for one party. It doesn't make it. It doesn't. Nobody on council is going out into the community and asking how you're registered to vote. And I think that that's an important thing for everybody to remember.
The Erie County Council member Jim Wertz with us here. Thanks for your candor. Always appreciate our conversation.
Absolutely.
Sir.
This has been great. Thanks so much, Joel.
You got it here. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show, making our way toward 5 o'clock.